Thank you again.
Sure.
I appreciate it. Clearly, you're familiar with some of the things we're talking about.
Right.
Tell me where you come down on just sort of the issue of the building code in Florida. Is it adequate? Does it need work? Are you happy with the process of how the building code is come up with and adjusted, because it is kind of a living thing?
It is. It absolutely is a living thing. I think that the challenge you have to understand, at least in Hurricane Michael, was most of these homes were older. So they weren't even up to the current building code for most of these, in most of the areas. Mm-hmm. And so the major devastation that you saw was because you had homes that were 40, 50, 60 years old in that area. And they were built under the early codes or frankly no codes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. I mean, a lot of them, I mean, there was almost no code before 92 or 95. That said, we do have different wind zones all throughout the state.
Right.
Given that we're seeing more storms, depending on who you talk to, stronger storms, mm-hmm. and the fact that anywhere in Florida has the potential to get hit with a major hurricane, right. Why not have a uniform wind code across the entire state?
Well, I think what you want is at least a minimum wind code across the entire state. And then areas like Miami-Dade that have a very extraneous wind code, where even if you want to install roof trusses, you have to do that with a certified engineer on site. Mm-hmm. Those types of things are just some things we don't see outside of Miami-Dade or maybe Monroe County. But I think what you do want is minimums around the state, and then allowing local jurisdictions to be able to tailor, because you're going to have stronger coastal winds than you are inland. Mm-hmm. And so maybe you want to provide some coastal flexibility or some inland flexibility versus coastal flexibility. I think that's probably appropriate. But I think you need to be thinking about that. But also you need to be thinking about the cost of insurance for new builds, and how much more it will cost to rebuild to the current codes, mm-hmm. and how that will affect overall insurance pricing for everybody in the region.
Mm-hmm. Now, we talked to Craig Fugate
mm-hmm.
for this story, and I mean, his opinion is really that the code as it is right now could stand to be strengthened. How difficult would it be to get something like that done? I mean, you're in Tallahassee. How hard, if you decided this is something you wanted to try to take on, how difficult would it be to get your fellow legislators to take that up?
Well, I think you have to understand that you're going to do this in context of what the overall insurance costs are going to be, what the overall building costs are going to be for this. And so if you tell everybody, look, we're going to make this adjustment to the building code, but the insurance rates that everybody pay go up 20%, then all of a sudden you're going to see some pushback on this conversation. Mm-hmm. So I think, but I think it's one of these areas where let's put the experts in the room, let's get the best advice we can get, and if we need to make adjustments, we can do that. But recognize it takes decades for building codes to play out overall in the overall community, because at least in Pinellas County we're built out. It's not like we're building a bunch of brand new homes. We might be building apartments here and there, mm-hmm. but the very sparse construction of new properties, most of it is homes that were built in the 30s, 40s, and up until the mid 80s, really. Mm-hmm. And that's so we can retrofit, but even that takes years and years to work through the system.
Right. You mentioned Pinellas. I mean, Pinellas is, as you said, has an older home stock, mm-hmm. and is right on the coast. Given those circumstances, I mean, what we saw in the Panhandle with Michael, are you concerned about Pinellas County and its readiness?
Well, I'm always concerned about Pinellas County. I think for Pinellas, the big threat is not even as much wind as it is flood, and that brings a whole new level of discussion. Should we be raising homes? How do we continue to mitigate against flood loss? Because our major concern in this community is major flooding.
Mm-hmm. Is this something you hear any of your fellow legislators talking about at all?
I hear a lot of my fellow legislators talking about insurance costs, mm-hmm. and how for many folks that's one of their biggest expenses anymore is the price of insurance, especially in coastal communities like ours where you have flood insurance on top of wind and top of homeowners. And so I think that's something that we're always very cognizant of, is how do we continue to focus on lowering insurance costs. But at the same time, we need to be thinking about new technologies, improvements in the building code, and that kind of overall how this all plays together. But I think my colleagues are very concerned about insurance costs right now.
One of the experts we talked to gave us a stat that a dollar, for every dollar you spend on the front end in construction, it's worth $6 in cleanup. Mm-hmm. The sort of an ounce of prevention beats a pound of cure,
Right.
Type of thing. Is that sort of? Do you agree with that? And do you agree?
Well, absolutely. I mean, but I think the challenge you run into is, again, new builds versus existing homes. And where you would be building new would mostly likely be inland, right? It's in eastern Hillsborough. It's in northern Pinellas, if at all in Pinellas. And then it's in the inland portions of the state of Florida. Most of the major coastal communities are built out, and that's where your greatest risk is. And understand it takes decades for that to play out in coastal communities because everything you're doing is retrofitting. And so what you can do is you can start with building codes for windows, for roofs, but largely your insurance companies are making you make those adjustments today, even over and above the building codes. They're making individuals put sheet or coverings on their roof. They're making them go to different types of roofing materials just in order to buy insurance. And so in some ways, there's a backdoor code going on via the insurance companies.
The market is dictating.
That's correct. Yeah, the insurance rates are dictating, or insurers are just saying we're not going to write your home unless you make these following adjustments, like putting coverings on your windows and doors in case of hurricanes.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Now you said that like a lot of this is retrofitting. Clearly, I mean, especially in a situation like Pinellas County, parts of Bay County, I mean, they're starting from scratch.
Yeah, they're starting in the world of the new building code.
Yes.
And for them, that's a struggle too, because again, some of those homes were not insured, and now all of a sudden these people are having to come out of pocket to build a new home because they didn't have the proper amount of insurance or any insurance at all. So what you're also doing is making the cost of their new housing more expensive. But we need to be thinking about this. There's not a hard and fast science to this issue. There is a little bit of science and a lot of art to figuring out what the building code should be in any given community. It's really easy to say, go to the max. Everywhere in the state of Florida should be Miami-Dade. But what you realize is you won't have anybody living there then, because people in Bay County can't afford to build under the Miami-Dade building codes.
Really? Like it's that much of a difference?
It's a huge difference.
Wow.
Huge difference.